This is really gonna bust up some fucking people, and they're just gonna be, the tears are gonna flow.
I don't care what anybody says.
Go on, lay it on me, roast me.
I'm more of a positive guy.
Yeah, I have an unpopular opinion here.
Height.
One hot take that will definitely send people after me to revoke my metal card.
It's other shit.
Ja, bare en gang bunke lort.
I mean, fucking hell.
Stop that bullshit.
This one I like.
Kiss is like for 7 or 9 years old.
It's an opinion. We all have them. We all like different things.
If you still can't take it, you know what we say at the Merciful Metal channel. Bye.
Welcome to the first Hot Takes and Unpopular Opinions video. Now, we'll probably end up with maybe 10 episodes or something like that because you guys had so many interesting hot takes and unpopular opinions. Now, the idea behind this is not to be contrarians or anything like that. It's basically to break with the notion that within certain fandoms, you have to have certain opinions to be a good fan, if you know what I mean. It's just to break with that idea, to break with the whole follow the leader, the whole sheep thing that we see in a lot of fandoms, and just embrace all the different opinions that we all have. So that's all there is to it. What we'll do in these videos is look at some of your hot takes and unpopular opinions and basically have fun with them because it's all about having fun with music. So let's get cracking. And we will start with Gauze69. Now, he starts out by saying, "Oh man, I could care less of other people's opinion. Don't get me wrong, I respect everyone's opinion. The least I can do is to listen and make my own. Sometimes I don't like a particular artist or particular genre, but that doesn't mean their music is bad or irrelevant." Bang. Right there, you have that mindset that I wish everybody would have, because this is the mindset of a sane person. This is the mindset of a person who knows we're all individuals, we're all different, we all have different life experiences, we all have different tastes. And just because there's something that you don't like that I happen to like, that's not a personal attack on me. And just because I don't like something you happen to like, it's not a personal attack on you. And it's not necessary for me to convince you into liking whatever I like, and vice versa. We're all different, we all have different opinions, we have different tastes, and we all have the right to enjoy whatever we enjoy. If everybody had the mindset that God69 presents here, I think the world would be a much less toxic place. There would be much less whining, and it would be great and hunky-dory. Anyways, God69 moves on and says, "When it comes to heavy metal music, I used to have a hard time with guttural or growl singing style, but I got used to it, I guess. I'm still kind of picky, and the instrumental has to convince me to get in through." I 100% recognize this situation because back in the day, in the early 90s, when death metal was huge and black metal was on the rise, I just couldn't get into extreme metal because I couldn't stomach the non-melodic harsh vocals. Just ask people who knew me back then and they will, say, yeah, that's the case. He hated death metal back then. I couldn't get into death metal, grindcore, death doom, all that stuff because I couldn't stomach the harsh vocals. Eventually, it clicked and I became a huge death metal fan. Black metal came a little bit later, further down the line. But I became a huge fan of death metal and death doom and grindcore and all that stuff with harsh vocals. But just like Gauze69, the instrumental aspect also had to have something to offer for me. You know what I mean? in order for me to get into the whole thing. But so I 100% recognize that situation because I was in the same boat. Uh, Gauze moves on to say one thing that may be an unpopular opinion is that I dislike extreme violence and gore elements, lyrics, artwork, and so on and so forth in heavy metal. Overall, I think it's a total nonsense, not to mention overused and explicit for the sake of it. Probably an excuse for the lack of better ideas. I can make exceptions for bands that grew out of that phase, though, such as Carcass and Death and Necrophagist. So I kind of get that. To be perfectly honest, I kind of get that. Um, and I also get why this would be an unpopular opinion because gore and violence and pretty much anything that is kind of edgy and provocative has been part and parcel of metal music from, basically its inception. You had like satanic lyrics and scary stuff and, war themed lyrics, and you have the debauchery of glam metal, all that stuff. And of course, the gore and violence of death metal and more extreme types of metal music. So it's been part of the artistic expression for sure. Uh, but it has become kind of gratuitous. I kind of agree. It seems now that there's gory imagery just for the sake of it, more so than for the sake of it being an artistic expression. I kind of agree. I don't know if it's an excuse for the lack of better ideas or maybe even the lack of talent. I don't know that, but it does seem to have become it's just a thing you do. You know what I mean? It's become a convention, and maybe in that sense, it's not even provocative or anything special anymore. Um, when it comes to Carcass, I actually quite like the way they went about it back in the day because their lyrics were extremely violent and gory, but all their lyrics back when they did Walk Grind and all that stuff were written in technical terminology from the medical sciences, like anatomy and physiology. So their gory lyrics seemed like almost like absurd humor and abstract humor and maybe even like postmodern, breaking down of all that stuff and breaking down the boundaries between uh, basically language, using highly technical and specialized language from one field in a completely different field, namely art and extreme music. So I always like that. Um, but yeah, I get where Goss is coming from here. Personally, I don't have a big problem with gory lyrics and stuff. I think it's a little bit silly at the end of the day, and like I said, gratuitous. Um, Unfortunately for me, I witnessed something when I was a teenager that kind of made me not appreciate gory depictions and stuff a whole lot. I don't want to go into any details, mostly out of respect for the victim and the people, the next of kin and stuff. But I witnessed the immediate aftermath of a very, very gory traffic accident. And I used to be a huge fan of slasher movies and stuff like that, but I don't know. I noticed that in the following years that I didn't enjoy slasher movies anymore, and I couldn't understand why. But then I put two and two together. Like I had actually witnessed real life gore, and that just made me stop appreciating artistic expressions or depictions of gore, including in extreme metal. But I don't have a big problem with it. But I completely get where GAS 69 is coming from. So thank you for that hot take and unpopular opinion. Speaking of Carcass, just another heavy metal maniac writes this in a comment. I don't think I have many hot takes, but this one would definitely count as one. I think Carcass's Swansong is a much better album than Hard Work. I partially agree on this, actually. I don't know that I think personally that it's a better album than Hard Work. but I don't think it's as bad an album as a lot of people make it out to be. Carcass, they're actually an interesting band because they've reinvented themselves so many times that they always kind of lose fans whenever they put out a new album because they change their style, but they also always gain a new cohort of fans. So if we kind of look at their history, they started out, with Reek of Putrefaction, which is noisy grindcore, and then they put out Symphonies of Sickness, which is more like death metal, and it has a much cleaner production, and they lost a lot of fans from the grindcore crowd, but then they gained a lot of fans from the death metal crowd. And then they put out Necroticism, which was kind of more progressive in a way, much more complex songs. So they gained a whole new uh, cohort of fans who were into more like, more advanced, I guess, technical, maybe. It's not really tech death, but it's quite progressive and complex songs. So they gained a whole bunch of fans who were into that stuff. And then they put out Hard Work, which was melodic death metal. And then they lost a whole lot of death metal fans, but they gained a lot of melodic death metal fans. And then they put out Swansong, which they themselves have described as more of a rock album. To me, it's more like a straight up heavy metal album with extreme metal vocals. And it seemed that everybody hated that album, and that was Swansong. And then they came back with Surgical Steel and Torn Arteries and all that stuff. And people seem to be very receptive towards that generally. But yeah, a lot of people hated Swansong. Personally, I don't hate Swansong. I really like it. I think it's full of super catchy songs and just great riffs that you can't help but, hum along to or bob your head along to because they're catchy and groovy. And there are actually more people out there who really like Swansong. For example, S&T Young really digs Swansong. Check out this clip.
Carcass Swansong, released in 96 or 97, somewhere around there. When I first heard this album, I thought they were trying to copy Megadeth. I think Megadeth had cryptic writings, and this album for me had kind of that sound to me. And even though I like cryptic writings by Megadeth, I didn't think it fit for a Carcass album. But the more I listened to this album over the years, especially, I think I bought it, it sat on my shelf forever, and then one day I saw it, I put it in there, probably early 2000, and it really clicked with me, and this album really, I've revisited quite a bit. I love Black Star, Keep Rotting in the Free World, Child's Play, Room 101 is awesome, Polarize is my favorite track on this. Go to Hell, I mean, there's so many good songs on this. It's a really solid album. It's just experimental away from their other sound, and I think people wanted to hear the same old, same-o. I like when bands have one of those off albums that everybody dislikes. It seems like those are the albums they like the most.
So there you go. I also really dig Swansong. S&T Young definitely digs Swansong. Whether it's better than Hard Work or not, I would probably disagree on that. I like Hard Work better, but I don't dislike Swansong. But I think it's nice to see some love for Swansong, given how much people hated it just because it was different. So there you go. Thank you for the love for Swansong. Okay, up next we have Metal and Rock Zone, who says, I just kind of like Meshuggah, and I don't really get how they became so popular. When I see them live, I feel like a nun in a strip club. Everyone is having fun except me. Yeah, so Meshuggah, it kind of invented the gent genre. I know it's kind of like contested. Is it a genre? Is it a sound? To me, gent, although I don't know a whole lot about it, but to me, it's a genre that's based on a sound and a style of guitar playing. Why? Because even the people who uh, kind of deny the idea of gent being a genre, they talk about gent bands. So they talk about it as if it's a genre. Anyways, it's a genre I never really got into. I never really got into Meshuggah either. I don't dislike them. I just never took the time to explore their sound and their style and their output. I do remember back in the day when they first, took off. A lot of the people I would hang out with, some of the bands I was in and stuff back in the day, uh, all the drummers loved Meshuggah because they played these advanced, polyrhythmic and odd time signature style drumming figures and all that stuff. So I think they were more like a drummer's band or maybe a musician's band, and I think maybe that's why a lot of people who like Meshuggah, they are musicians themselves, maybe who admire the technical ability of the members of Meshuggah. Uh, Personally, like I said, I never really got into them. I don't hate them or dislike them or anything like that. And I've seen them live too. And I didn't feel like a nun at a strip club for sure, but I didn't feel like my world was rocked either. It was impressive for sure, especially that they could play those things live. But yeah, it's a band that I never really got into either. Um, I'm not hating on them. I don't dislike them. I'm not hating on people who like Meshuggah. And I'm not going to exclude the possibility of me exploring their music at some point, but it's just not going to be right now. But there you go. Not everybody likes Meshuggah. Now, there's this whole thing a couple of months ago. It came out that Zetro was kicked out of Exodus, and um, Rob Dukes was back in the fold. And a lot of people have a lot of very strong opinions on that, to the point that, as Josh Keach points out, not having a strong opinion on that is almost like kind of unusual. Check out what he has to say.
This band, Exodus, more specifically the vocalist, because Zetro Souza is now out of Exodus, and they've got Rob Dukes back in the band. And I can't lie, I've seen a lot of people think this is good, I've seen a couple of people think that it's bad, but to be honest, I just have no opinion on it whatsoever, because I like all the vocalists from Exodus. I like the vocalists equally. There isn't an era of the band that I don't really like, to be honest. I can't lie, I'm quite excited for the new Exodus album with Rob Dukes on the vocals. These albums here are the latest ones that they've done, with Zetro back on the vocals, and I can't lie, his vocals have kind of gotten worse over the years. They've kind of got more like goblin-y and, like nyah, nyah. I mean, he's always kind of done that, but it's just kind of got worse over the years. And I think a more aggressive vocal style, like what Rob Dukes does on this album, would fit the band better, and I'm excited to hear what they do next.
So while Josh, at the end of the day, doesn't really have any strong opinions on this situation with Exodus, he is a little bit excited that Rob Dukes is back in the band, and I think that's fair enough. You got a new singer, or in this case, you got an old singer back, and it's going to be exciting and interesting to see what the future has in store, what the output will be. Now, there are a lot of people who actually really like the idea that Rob Dukes is back in Exodus. For example, Metal Never Dies is very excited about Rob Dukes' return. Check this out.
I'm going to say that Rob Dukes is a better vocalist than Zetro. And here's I have a Zetro album here. It was probably my favorite album with Zetro on it. Gary Holt says that they made Zetro try his best to sound like Paul Bailoff, and I think this is what this album was supposed to be made for before he passed away. This was supposed to be for Paul Bailoff. Unfortunately, he moved on. And then Rob Dukes comes to do this album, and this is a beast of an album. Shovelhead and Kill Machine, and Rob Dukes' vocals are just awesome. I'm talking about that because like that's the biggest thing right now is that Exodus parted ways with Zetro. Not Zetro parting ways with Exodus. It's Exodus parted ways. So they kicked them out. They kicked them out of the band. There's always been a lot of bickering. Gary Holt saying a lot of stuff about Zetro and calling him a fat ass and all this other stuff back before. But like this time, who knows? He says a lot of stuff. But I'm really happy that Rob Dukes is back on vocals. I'm actually looking forward to that album.
And similarly, Trevor Hickey is a big fan of Rob Dukes, so he is also very excited to have Rob Dukes back. Check this out.
Exodus. The correct singer has returned. Not to discredit anything from Zetro, okay? Zetro was the voice for the longest time. Paul Bailoff was the first. Bailoff started it all vocally. Again, I don't dislike Zetro. I like Zetro. I just really happen to like Rob Dukes more because he makes Exodus sound more pissed off than anybody else. If I listen to Exodus and I hear those riffs, I want a really hard sort of lower end scream compared to the fucking the higher pitch stuff. I'm sorry, that's just what I like. That's my opinion.
And I get it because with Rob Dukes, Exodus put out some really aggressive thrash metal albums the first time around he was back in the band. So I get why Metal Never Dies and Trevor Hickey, why they are excited that Rob Dukes is back in the band. Personally, I don't know. I have nothing against Rob Dukes being back in the band. I just always liked Steve Zetro's vocals, and actually, the more goblin-y, the better for me. So I was a bit bummed out that he was out of the band, but I'm sure that they will do great things with Rob Dukes back in the band. I did see them live once with Rob Dukes, and actually, it was a little bit underwhelming. The whole band seemed a little bit low energy, and so that wasn't the greatest show. In all fairness, they took to the stage right after Death Angel, who had put on one of the best live shows I had ever seen. So it's always hard to follow another band who put on a great show. So the one time I saw them live with Rob Dukes, it was a little bit underwhelming, but maybe they had a bad day. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely very interested to see what they do with Rob Dukes. I'm a bit of a Zetro guy myself. I always liked Zetro fronted Exodus, and like I said, the more goblin-y, the better to me. But I guess the this is kind of a win-win situation in a way because now we'll have Exodus putting out stuff with Rob Dukes doing their thing, and then maybe I don't know, maybe Zetro will go back and do some work with Hatriot, which was a fantastic band that he was in. It was almost like a family band with some of his kids and some nephews and stuff. That would be pretty cool if he went back to Hatriot and they put out some awesome albums. So while I was a little bit bummed out that he was out of the band, and also the kind of drama that surrounded it kind of made me sad because I hate it when it all just descends into drama. That's a shame. What I was thinking was that it would have been cool maybe if they brought in a brand new guy to do the vocals, just to see where that would take them. But like I said, no problem with Rob Dukes being back in the band. I'm very interested to see where they go. It's a little bit of a bummer to me that they kicked out Zetro, but it's going to be very interesting to see where he goes with the future for him. Here's hoping some new Hatriot or anything else that's really cool. I'm hoping it's going to be a win-win situation. But there you go. Some hot takes and unpopular opinions from different perspectives on the whole Exodus situation. Now, I'm sure we all know that feeling. One of our favorite bands, they split up. They did their last tour a couple of years ago, but now they're back on another tour. Finally, we get a chance to see them live. We never got a chance to see them live before that. Now we have a chance to see them live. It's fantastic. not everybody agrees on this. There's some people who are kind of tired of this whole idea that bands say this is going to be our final tour, and then they go out on that tour, and then a couple of years down the line they go out on another tour, and that's going to be their final tour, and then a couple of years further down the line they go out on yet another tour, that's going to be their final tour. There are some people who are pretty tired of that stuff. Check out what Mark from the Wandering Souls webzine has to say about this.
But I also dislike sometimes that bands are telling every time this is the final tour. I've seen Black Sabbath do it a couple of times, and Judas Priest and whatever. There were times that this is the final thing and this is the last tour and etc. And then they go and just continue. I thought, what happened with final tour? They're not gonna play live anymore. You know, if it gets fresh blood, you're gonna play live, or people demand it, or you get enough money for it, or whatever. You gotta play live. Don't tell every time this is the final tour. I don't fucking believe it. You tour while you can, and when you want to. There are people that bands that are tour never tour. That's also a known thing. But don't say every time this is the final tour or the last tour or whatever. You never know. There might be a reunion and there's a new tour. Again, another commercial thing to get people to the venues. That's a thing for sure. So please stop that crap.
And I will say, I kind of agree on this sentiment. It is actually, it's a little bit annoying, and it seems dishonest when a band says, this is our final tour, this is your last chance to see us live. Then they do the same thing a couple of years later, and they do the same thing a couple of years later. It seems like a cash grab. It does end up seeming like a cash grab. Even if it's just because, this is the bread and butter, it's their life. They can't stay away from the stage. They can't stay away from touring. I think that's fine. But then, like Mark says, don't go around saying this is your last tour, right? Just say, hey, we go out on another tour. We can't not do it. We love doing this stuff. I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with these legacy bands who have stopped putting out albums, but they keep going on tour and playing shows. So maybe this is my unpopular opinion right here. I don't have a problem with that as long as they're honest about it, because a lot of people love those classics and they want to hear them live. And if those guys in the bands, or guys and gals, if they get a kick out of playing live and that improves their lives, basically their lives, and they enjoy doing that stuff and it makes them happy and it makes the fans happy, why not? But I agree with Mark that just don't say you're going out on your last tour. Again, it's dishonest, and maybe at the end of the day it'll make people stop wanting to go to your shows. I know a bunch of bands that, pull this stunt all the time, and I've gone from being very excited to having the opportunity to see them live to not caring. I don't care anymore. So yeah, I agree with Mark on this. So there you go. Now, metal music, along with lots of other genres, it's very conventionalized, and to the point that when people start experimenting with other styles, other ways of playing, instrumentation from other genres that we don't associate with metal, a lot of fans get kind of angry at that and they don't like it. And one instrument that a lot of people just don't want in metal at all, that's the saxophone. See what Nasty Boy Scott has to say about this.
I is a full-time saxophone player, and I've heard multiple times in the VC, like in the metal VC, no saxophone on metal albums, it sucks, get rid of it. Any instrument can suck, I think. Like, there are tons of albums that are ruined by the keyboards on it, but then on the other hand, there are a lot of albums that the keyboard kind of makes it, like, it gives it a different texture that it wouldn't have otherwise. So I'm in favor of sax, I guess I would say. And an example of that is this band, White Ward. This is their album Love Exchange Failure. This is the first one I heard. In the intro to the album, it's kind of like building up, and then when the sax comes in, it just really adds a whole nother dimension to it. I think sax is unfairly maligned in
I
metal.
have to say, I agree 100% with Scott on this. I don't have a problem with the saxophone in metal music if it's done right. Now, if you don't like the saxophone in metal music, you just don't like the saxophone in metal music. That's not a problem. We'll have differences in what we like and what we don't like in metal music. Personally, if it's done in an interesting way that moves the genre forward or just serves the individual song in question, I don't have a problem with it. I like it. I think maybe the saxophone is much maligned, maybe because I think a lot of people associate it with at least three things. I think maybe it's associated with jazz fusion and the kind of maybe pretentiousness and snobbiness that a lot of people who like jazz fusion, it's kind of, it's kind of associated with them. They're kind of accused of being snobby and all that stuff and pretentious. And I guess that would include me because I kind of do like a lot of jazz fusion. So there you go. It's also associated, I think, with cheesy 80s rock. I don't know if you guys remember back in the 80s, a typical 80s rock and pop song would have a saxophone solo in it. And I think it's also associated with cheesy, sexy time, smooth jazz from the 80s as well. With the midnight saxophone thing. So I think maybe a lot of people don't want that stuff in their metal music. Like I said, I don't really care if it serves the song and it moves that song forward, if it moves the band's style forward, if it moves the genre forward, maybe it helps develop a new genre or just helps make an existing subgenre more interesting. I don't see the problem with the saxophone in metal. So I'm with Nasty Boy Scott on that one. So there you go, episode 1 of the Hot Takes and Unpopular Opinions series. Thanks to everybody who shared with me their hot takes and unpopular opinions. I'll be back with more in the next episode. For now, thanks for watching.
It's warm here.